A very warm welcome, everyone. Today, we are diving deep into a really powerful section of the Quran's fourth chapter, An-Nisa, which actually means the women. Now, these verses, they offer some profound guidance on pretty much everything, from conduct on the battlefield to justice in the courtroom, all the way to the dynamics of family life. So we're going to dig in and see how these ancient verses laid the groundwork for community that was both just and resilient.
So that brings up a really fascinating question, right? How does a text from over 1,400 years ago provide a practical and spiritual compass for a community that's facing these immediate, high-stakes challenges? And that's really at the heart of what we're going to unpack today. Here's our roadmap. First, we'll kick things off with faith in times of crisis. Then, we'll get into a dramatic court case that really put the meaning of justice to the test. From there, we'll look at the two paths, guidance versus misguidance. See how fairness is applied right inside the home, and we'll wrap it all up by looking at the ultimate authority behind it all. Okay, let's jump right in. You have to remember, the early Muslim community wasn't just sitting still. They were often on the move, traveling, and sometimes in really dangerous situations. So they needed guidance for worship that was adaptable, that was merciful, to make sure their connection with God stayed strong no matter what was going on around them. And a perfect example of this is something called al-Qasr. It's basically a divine permission slip to shorten some of the daily prayers when you're traveling. Now, it was first revealed out of a real concern for safety, from ambushes on the road. But the Prophet's practice later extended it as a mercy for all travelers, even when it's peaceful. It's this beautiful example of faith being flexible enough for the realities of life. Now get this, even when you're facing an imminent attack, prayer isn't just tossed aside. No way. Instead, it transforms into this highly organized, strategic ritual. One group prays while the other stands guard, weapons literally at the ready, and then they swap. It just goes to show you how central prayer is. It's woven right into the fabric of life and death. And this verse right here, it gets to the heart of it all. While the form of the prayer can change depending on the situation, the obligation itself is non-negotiable. So the verse really hammers home this idea that prayer is a foundational discipline, locked in at specific times, and it's what anchors the community in spiritual strength. All right, now we get to what is really the narrative heart of this section. And this isn't some abstract theory. This is a real-life incident that unpacked a timeless principle about justice, forcing this incredibly difficult choice between loyalty to your community and loyalty to divine truth. So here's the setup. You have a man from a Muslim tribe who steals a shield, and to cover his tracks, he plants the evidence with an innocent Jewish man who lives in his neighborhood. Then the thief's family goes straight to the Prophet Muhammad to defend their guy and demand that the Jewish man be punished for the crime. I mean, you can imagine the pressure, right? On one side, you have a member of the Prophet's own community, and he's got his entire tribe backing him up. And on the other side, an outsider, an innocent man with absolutely no one from the community to speak up for him. The easy path, the human path, would be to side with your own people. But then, something incredible happens. A revelation comes down directly from God. This verse, and the ones around it, came down specifically to clear the name of the innocent Jewish man and to expose the Muslim man's lie. It calls the act of framing someone innocent a manifest sin. Just out in the open, clear as day. And the result? Well, it was revolutionary. The Quran established this radical standard of justice, one that is completely and totally impartial. Truth comes before your tribe. Justice comes before religious affiliation. It was a declaration that fairness has to be absolute, even when it means ruling against one of your own. So, this incredible court case, it naturally leads us to a bigger conversation about what pulls us toward truth and what leads us down the wrong path. It's really about that internal struggle between sincerity and deception. And what's so fascinating here is the distinction the Quran makes. It says, hey, not all secret talks are bad. In fact, conversations that are about encouraging charity or promoting what's right or trying to make peace between people, those are actually praised. What's condemned is the secret plotting, the scheming done to defend someone you know is dishonest or to spread corruption. And speaking of deceit and betrayal, the verses then shift to the ultimate spiritual betrayal, the one sin that, if a person doesn't repent from it, seals their fate. This sin is known as shirk, the act of associating partners with the one God. In the Islamic worldview, pretty much any other sin can be forgiven if you're sincerely sorry. But to die in a state of polytheism is described as going far astray, Because at its core, it's a complete misunderstanding of the nature of reality and our relationship with our Creator. So what you have here is a really clear choice, a fork in the road. On one side, you've got Allah's promise, which is described as the absolute truth, and it leads to an eternal reward. And on the other side, you've got Satan's playbook, creating false desires, making all these empty promises that are just a delusion and lead to what the text calls a clear loss. Okay, so let's bring this big, grand principle of absolute justice down to the most personal level imaginable, our homes. Because the exact same standards of fairness and protecting the vulnerable, they apply within our families and marriages too. And the guidance here is super practical. There are these really strong commands to protect orphan girls from being cheated out of their inheritance or forced into unfair marriages. This was a huge social reform, making sure the most vulnerable weren't taken advantage of. The verses also encourage couples to try and work things out, but they also recognize human limits. They demand total fairness in treatment and provisions, even when perfect emotional equality might not be possible. And even if a marriage has to end, there's a message of hope, saying that God can provide for both people from His abundance. So, for the grand finale of this section, the camera kind of pulls way back. It moves from these specific cases and community rules to a universal, timeless message about accountability and God's ultimate sovereignty over, well, everything. And right here, the Quran makes what was a truly radical declaration for its time. It says salvation isn't based on just wishful thinking or what group you belong to. It's not enough to just say, I'm a Muslim, or as the text also mentions, I'm a Jew, or I'm a Christian. It's about something much deeper. So, who gets to paradise? The answer is just so simple and so universal. It's anyone, and it says this explicitly, male or female, who combines sincere belief with righteous action. The text makes it crystal clear your gender has zero bearing on your spiritual reward. What matters is taking that faith and translating it into good deeds. And this last verse we're looking at, man, it just ties everything together beautifully. It reminds us that everything in the heavens and the earth already belongs to God. Our faith, our sense of justice, our good deeds, at the end of the day, they benefit us. God is completely free of all need. Our actions don't add a single thing to His kingdom. It's all for our own good. And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? If these verses from 1400 years ago are teaching us that accountability is ultimately personal and that the standard for justice has to be absolute and impartial, what does that demand from each of us, right here, right now, in our families, in our communities, and in our world today?